Hey guys, welcome to this episode of The Suspense is Killing Me. Today we have the one and only Kev Harrison.
Lucas, how are you doing, man? It is great to be here. Nice to chat with you.
What's up, man? We haven't seen each other since AuthorCon, which was
Exactly.
ironically not that long ago, but like
it feels like a long time though. It's like 2 months, and it's a month, and it feels like it's a lifetime.
Yes, and you've had a lot happening since then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, you're officially Twitter famous now. We'll talk about that, I'm sure.
Sure. Yeah.
I
mean, I mention sex bots on here, or is that?
We can talk about sex bots.
Fine. Good. Fine.
Yeah, especially if you have any good like sex bot accounts to recommend. It's like, we want the premium sex bot account. That'd be great. So
this will make sense later, listeners. Don't worry, this will make sense.
Yes, that's not what his book's actually about. So.
No, very much not.
There are no sex bots in Shadow of the Hidden. So, So where are you at in the world? You're in the UK.
No, I'm in Portugal. I actually live in Portugal. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
So I've lived here for, in this September, it'll be 10 years. Although I am going back to the UK next month because I work there every summer, which means involves like a drive across Portugal to north of Spain, a boat ride to Portsmouth in England, and then 3 months there, like teaching people at university. And then I come back.
Because your spouse is Portuguese, right?
She is Portuguese, absolutely. That's my missus. Yeah, she's a doctor here, so she can't come with me for the summer because she's busy like saving people from horrendous deaths, and which is a good thing, I suppose.
While you gallivant about the coast.
Exactly. I mean, I just teach people English and drink a lot of the beer that I miss from back home. So yeah.
That's all right. Excellent. Yeah. So like, where in the UK are you from?
I grew up in one of the worst towns in the world, actually. It's a town called Woking, but it has got a lot of like artistic heritage because H.G. Wells is from there, the inventor, well, not the inventor, but one of the early proponents of sci-fi and I would argue horror as well, because his book, The War of the Worlds, was actually set in Woking. And funny fact, he actually started writing that book because he just wanted a reason to destroy Woking in written form, which is my hometown. And I completely understand that vibe. Like, that makes so much sense to me.
Is that bad?
It is a hellhole. Like, the architecture is just like, it's just like a series of terrible experiments, and the city, the town, the way it's built is like sort of just lots of siloed populations that all hate each other. So you end up with like chain fights in the town square on a Friday night, that kind of thing. It's really not good. Not good.
This sounds really fun though. Like, it sounds like there's a lot of really interesting and like entertaining events happening there. You just don't want to be involved in any of them. You just want to like observe them.
Like sort of this like perverse sort of like voyeuristic indulgence. Yeah.
Yeah. So what area of the UK is that in?
So it's like 45 kilometers, so about 30 miles southwest of London. So it's actually quite like a central area. The good thing about that is I grew up like very much into metal music. And so I had like a 25-30 minute train ride in to see all my favorite bands when I was a teenager. So that was like every weekend, like growing up.
Yes. Okay. Are you cool with like listing some of those bands? Like, who are you going to see?
My first ever gig, this is ridiculous, by the way, I realize now, was at the Gates with Dissection and a local band called Rain supporting them. And it was just like absolutely mental. Like I just was 15 years old, like stage diving during like songs from At the Gates' Slaughter of the Soul album. I was just like, this is the best thing ever.
Yes. You go home, like the whole trip home, you just got this shit-eating grin on your face and
buzzing. Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. So how long, like, did you start writing at a young age, or were you, I mean, because I find a lot of people that are into music either dive into becoming artists in the music scene, like, or learning an instrument, or if they're also avid readers, they dive right into writing, even though they might not do anything with it for a while.
I did a lot of reading, definitely. And like when I was in primary school, I used to write stories about my cat. I've always had cats. And I used to write stories about this cat's adventures. It started off with like an innocent, like kind of true story about something that happened in the holidays that was kind of funny. And then when I saw all the other kids like sort of like paying attention, I was like, I'm going to do more of this. So I just started inventing like increasingly stupid adventures. And then eventually we went to like a summer camp, like a pre sort of summer
Okay.
holiday, like camping event
Yeah.
in like a neighboring town that wasn't a crap hole. And we went to this museum in the day, and lots of people bought these like Roman coins from like the old Roman settlement.
Yeah.
And when we had this talent show in the end, instead of like doing singing or dancing, I wrote a horror story, like a ghost story, about like a spirit trapped in the coins, and loads of kids couldn't go to sleep and were crying through the night, and all the teachers didn't sleep either. So I was just so proud of myself. It was a beautiful night.
Yes. Good for you, man.
Mm.
Ruining sleep from a young age
Exactly.
for all the brave souls that would dive into it. I'm pulling your website up real quick. If people see the flashing lights, because I wanted to make sure I could see the list of things that you got. And I love that you've got this map on your website of like
the places that are in Shadow of the Hidden.
Yes.
Yeah, because when it came out, lots of people said like, why isn't there a map in this book? And I was like, why isn't there a map in this book? This is a very stupid missed opportunity on my part. So I decided to make one.
Well, did you tell them they can just go look at Google, like, or whatever, like, you know?
Yeah, but there. I suppose like having like I know what they mean though, because like when I read a book with lots of locations, I love like sort of seeing like the dot of the different places they went to and stuff. So yeah.
Way to save the readers from my amazing critique of their very sound recommendation. Like, you guys all did a very nice thing by telling him that. I'm sorry I'm picking on you.
If only they told me like before I released it, but whatever. You know.
Yeah, that would have been nice. So like we'll dive a little bit more into the book, but this is kind of a good opportunity to ask how you ended up in Turkey and in these other countries like Tunisia and Egypt. Like, were you there as a teacher? Because you teach now. Is that what brought you there?
Well, Turkey, I did live there for about half a year as a teacher. And it was a great experience. Like it was in southwestern Anatolia. So like you said before we went on air that you went to Marmaris in your previous career.
Yeah.
And I was about an hour, drive sort of inland from Marmaris, like along the coast to the south east. And so that was a really good experience I had there. My job did turn out to be illegal, so I had to leave, which was less than ideal. But the other places like Tunisia I've been just a couple of times as a tourist, but like spent a lot of time traveling around. Like it was real like backpacking, getting to know the culture and the people kind of stuff. And Egypt I went to 5 times because I had an ex-girlfriend who was an Egyptologist. So yeah,
that's amazing.
All the cool stuff.
Yeah, man. And did you live in Istanbul as well?
Never lived in Istanbul. No, it's my favorite city in the whole world, though. Like, I mean, I just absolutely love it. Have you been to Istanbul?
I have not been in Istanbul. I've been right outside of Istanbul
like
on a ship,
sailing sort of like past it on the Bosphorus.
Like, hey, take pictures of Istanbul as we pass through the realm of the czars.
Which it's absolutely amazing. Like Istanbul is like this weird kind of combination of like there are some streets where you're like you could be in Berlin. You know, it's just like wide boulevards, like lots of fancy stuff, like restaurants and boutiques and stuff. And then like a mile and a half down the road, you've got places that look like, you know, any kind of Middle Eastern country, you know, like residential neighborhoods and stuff. It's just absolutely mad fusion. It's amazing.
It's crazy. I mean, I think one of the magical things about a city like Istanbul is just it's been there for so long. It's so rich, you know, the culture there is so dynamic, and it's been the heart of like commerce and cultural influence in that part of the world for so long. It's
absolutely, yeah.
I mean, just seeing that city was like, wow. I mean, the whole time we had been jumping from port town to port town, that was the first one that we passed and didn't stop in, where I was like, oh, look at that. Like we went by the Italian coast was the most beautiful thing I'd seen, you know, passing between Sicily and the mainland. But I mean, I think I underestimated how big Istanbul is.
Yeah, it's a huge city. Absolutely. Yeah. And it takes a long time to get from one side to the other. And it's just so, like I say, just so completely bonkers, the mix of it. And you saying about the age of it, I mean, like there's a place there, they've got like a water storage cistern under the ground in the old neighborhood called Sultan Ahmet. And like, and that cistern was lost for like 800 years. And then
Wow.
like some French archaeologists went there for a different project, and they were staying with some local diggers in their houses. And the diggers were like, "Do you want to have some fish for dinner?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure. Where are you going to get the fish?" And they were like, "Oh, we just fish like under our house." And the French guys are like, "Sorry, what?" And they're like, "Yeah, there's like some fish like lived under our house, like some carp." And they were like, "That doesn't make any sense." So they like kind of like extended these holes they were fishing under, and then they shone like torches down there, and they're like, "Yeah, there's like about like a sort of half a square mile of cistern held up with like pillars from like the 8th century here."
Wow.
Madness. This was like in 1800s or something. Yeah, absolutely
That's
crazy.
insane.
Yeah. There's a
Yeah.
brilliant Medusa head on its side as well at the far end. It's just like
Really?
amazing. Yeah, it's so
See,
badass.
it's just such a cool. It's just such a cool like. But I don't even know how to explain this. Like when you're in that part of the world, you feel different. Like
Yeah.
it's not just like that you're in a different country, or I mean, I've been to probably 50 or 60 different countries, but like when you're there, things feel different. Like the
I agree.
world feels different. It felt very spiritual, and it
Yeah.
feels very like multi-layered or deep. Like there's a depth to the culture there that just kind of like radiates like an energy throughout those areas, and it's like very calming for me at least. And I just found it like really cool. I was like, this is not something I expected. You can't avoid it in that part of the world, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
many layers, like you say. Yeah.
So so clearly your time over there has a significant influence on Shadows.
Mm.
And so for those that aren't familiar, can you talk a little bit about Shadows of the Hidden and what the story is about without, I know it's up to you whether you want to include spoilers or not. I don't have a policy.
I'll do mild spoilers.
Okay.
So like Shadow of the Hidden basically is a jinn story. So for like people that don't know, jinn is like what we think of in the West as a genie, except it's not like, going to be granting any wishes. It's more going to be like mutilating your livestock and cursing you to oblivion. And so the book actually interestingly started with something that happened in real life to me when I lived there.
Really?
I had a friend who taught me to play backgammon, which was really cool.
Yep.
And he was a very good teacher. I can't remember now how to play it, which is really annoying actually, because it was like this 2011 that I was there.
I love backgammon.
It's such a good game, man.
Yeah.
Like really, really tactical. I love it. But anyway, so he taught me to play backgammon, and we were drinking together and stuff, and like hanging out a lot. And then one day, in his ice cream bar, just like at the start of the book, an old woman comes over, like in widow dress, which in that sort of particular area of Turkey, the widow culture is like they wear all black, they wear a black veil, and like basically those people are entitled to some sort of like humanitarian support from like everybody. If they come along and ask you for like bread or a coffee, you just give them the bread, give them the coffee, off they go. Fair enough, because they have quite a lot of sort of historic archetypal kind of roles within society and family, so they generally don't have the capacity to work, especially when they're older. So fine, fair enough. So this woman comes over, but she doesn't ask for bread, she asks for ice cream. And my friend, who makes quite a lot of money from his ice cream, was like, look, no, I pay for very good ice cream, like I'll give you a sandwich, like I'll make you some tea, whatever, water, fine, whatever you want, juice, but no ice cream. And she like had apparently been there a few times already, and then just completely flipped out. And she starts shouting at him in Turkish. And I'm just sitting at this table, not really speaking Turkish well, because I understood a little bit, because I'd only been there for like 5 months, 6 months, whatever. And so I was just really uncomfortable. And then I heard her change from Turkish to Arabic. And my friend just lost his shit completely.
It's
and he's
just like the book.
It's just like the book, like this ex-military guy. And he's like terrified, like completely terrified, and like crying. And I was like, what happened there? Do you know what I mean? Like absolutely bewildered.
Yeah.
And then he explained to me after she went away that she put this gin curse on him. And then sure enough, like basically his ice cream trolley was vandalized overnight.
It's the book.
It's the book.
I
and
love
he
it.
was convinced it was the gin, like completely convinced. And I was convinced it was like some thugs or whatever that knew the old widow. In real life, nothing else happened. That one weird thing happened, and it was weird, but nothing else happened. In the book, we kind of wonder, and I did ask my friend's permission. He said, if you use my name, I will murder you. But if you don't use my name, it's fine.
So your friend is Oz.
Yeah, but with a different name.
And you're Seb.
Well, I'm not really Seb because he's like he's got a very different kind of educational background to me. He knows much more important shit than I do. And yeah, so basically then like the book just kind of is like a thought experiment of like, what if it was a jinn, and what if it was not only a jinn but like what they call in like Arabic they call the ghoul, which is where we get the word ghoul from, interestingly, in English. Which is like this particularly vengeful, like nasty bastard kind of jinn that just screws with people because they like it.
Can you explain for the people that aren't familiar with the word jinn what exactly a jinn is?
Yeah, so well, I mean, basically, it's a being that actually predates Islamic scripture. It's very very prevalent in Islamic folklore and stuff, like from sort of Persia and the Middle East and so on. But it kind of predates Islam, because Islam's like originated in sort of 7th century AD. I think jinn have been around for a lot longer, and they're believed to be beings that exist from the like elements in the old-fashioned sense of fire and air. And they're sentient. They have like a sort of a neural network that means all the jinn can communicate with each other at any one time. And they're just, some people describe them as similar to demons, but I think that's kind of oversimplifying it.
Yeah, I was fascinated by the way you approached all of this just like was immediately recognizable and resonated with me as someone that's been in that region of the world. It's like, yeah, this is like stuff that, I could actually see all this happening, because they have these really rich traditions and I mean, there's just so much to their perspective on spirituality and on alternate, existence and spiritual world and all the things that come with being in that part of the world. I hate to, it's not Middle East, it's bigger than that. It's bigger than just the Middle East.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyways, I was like, yes, like as soon as I got in and I got through the first few chapters, I'm like, all right, I'm going to love this book. This is going to be so much fun. And then and then you go to Tunisia and I'm like, yes, I've been there. This is great. But so I was, having a very relatable experience with the story. And I was going to ask you, this is like great that you were able to address this to a bit. Cause I was going to ask you what your motivation was or your inspiration behind forming this around a curse, right? That's kind of the kickoff.
Yeah. And I wanted to write a story because when that happened, I mean, I actually asked him at the time, I said like, dude, can I one day like write a story about this? And he was like, because I wasn't writing then seriously in any way, but I just thought like, this is such a like mad thing to happen. Like, it's just kind of, I've got to use it. So I said to him, can I use it? And he said, yeah, sure. As long as you don't use my name. And that kind of idea has been boiling away in the back of my head for sort of, I finished it in 2022. So almost 10 years, I suppose, before I started writing it in anger, as it were. But all the time I was wondering like how to frame the rest of the story, like where to go with it from that jumping off point. And when I wanted to start writing it, I got through writing Below, which was the previous novella that I wrote before that. And then another novella, which is for a collection of novellas, which I'm still working with some friends, which is A Haunting. And then I was like, right, I'm going to write this jinn story. So I need to start investigating some jinn. And at that moment, in this incredible case of serendipity, a famous Pakistani-American podcaster who actually works as a lawyer helping people who've been like wrongfully convicted, normally people of color, started this podcast series called The Hidden Jinn, where she was like, look, I'm a lawyer, I'm a serious person, but I want to talk about like how the jinn influenced my culture and like the origin so that Western people can kind of understand it a bit better. And so this like dropped at the moment where I was thinking about writing it. So I just like devoured this podcast, devoured the links and the book recommendations that she put in the show notes at the end of every episode. And I was just like, Rabia Chowdhury, I love you. Thank you so much. This is wonderful timing.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And you published this with Bridget's Gate, just for those that aren't familiar. And just what a wonderful job this whole story has been. I've with the minute I saw it, I was like, oh, this looks like a really intriguing read, and the book description and the cover art and everything. but I don't think anyone really understands how cool this story is until you
Ah,
get into it, right? I don't think, you can only do so much with a cover, and you can only do so much with a description. This is one of those books that actually like surpasses my expectations of like my cursory
so
view.
glad to hear that, man.
No, I love it. And so the I think a lot of it just has to do with this. This is not recycled. Like, it's a really original story, even though we've been writing about curses and all these things for years. This one's very unique because of the way you apply it and the characters. I could tell. This is why I was happy to hear that this was kind of loosely based on real people and a real event. You can feel that in your characters, that these are not shallow, fast, like fabricated beings. Like I could
Sure.
sense that in the way you wrote about them, the way you spoke about your characters, even though you don't have like this extensive like character build or any of that kind of craziness that would come along with longer fiction. So I could feel that in the writing right away. And when I thought about your use of a curse, I was thinking, okay, this is cool. I don't read a lot of horror that's based on this area of the world or on these types of circumstances, so that's cool. And I'm going and going and going, and we get to the part where we're into Tunisia, and they read the actual, well, similar curse to what
Yeah.
was spoken about Oz in Turkey. When they're in Tunisia, they find it in the museum.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, is this a real thing? Did you write that curse? Did you make up that curse, or was this a real curse that's been documented?
So there have been like curses which are similar, but like I mean, if you ever talk to someone who is a believer in jinn and all things jinn, they will tell you like don't talk about them and don't like read off any of their real names, because like they're just waiting. Like, and the minute you do that, they'll be like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was very careful to kind of tread like around that. So I kind of looked at some of the examples and kind of made my own twisted version. I mean, in university, I actually studied philosophy and classical studies, which meant I specialized in Roman history and Latin and stuff. And I did a module on curses in the Roman world, and like the ones from the Roman section of that museum in the book in Tunisia are all legit curses, like completely legit, like stuff about like wishing that like the opposing team in the chariot race will like be overcome with like some sort of horrible plague, and
it's like the greens and whites or whatever,
my bones and stuff. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, wow. I mean, like I have pretty strong feelings about my football team, but like I'm not sure I go that
far. Yeah, that's pretty funny, man. I was I mean, to me, there's not, I don't know, I don't feel like it's a very superstitious thing when there's that much steeped history in it, right? Like, yeah, when it feels so fabricated and like flimsy and thin, you go, yeah, it's superstition. But when you have something that's endured literal centuries of culture,
yeah, absolutely,
you kind of start to like go, oh, let's be a little bit more careful with this than some kid's tale, you know?
Absolutely. And it's like I went to see Ari Aster, who directed Hereditary and stuff. I went to see a talk with him a couple of years ago here in Lisbon, because he did like an early showing of I think it was Midsummer.
Okay.
And he was talking about like when he put the demon Payman into Hereditary, and like he originally wrote it to use like the actual wording and symbolism that we used in summoning this demon, really. And then before he got the final version, he was like, do you know, maybe I'm just not going to fuck with this. I'm just going to change a few things just in case. I don't believe it, but
tempt fate.
Yeah, exactly.
Want to play that game.
Absolutely.
I think that's because we perceive the risk. It's all about risk perception, right? So like if you're playing with things like that and you really think it, even if you think it's a flimsy chance of occurring, but the repercussions are so significant if it does.
Exactly.
That kind of changes the math a little bit in your head.
It's why I've never done the Ouija board or anything like that. You know, like I'm curious, but like I'm not curious enough to just tempt fate into like, whatever it would be.
So you've never done Bloody Mary or
No, none of that
Candyman
stuff.
or any?
Forget it. Absolutely not. Someone else could do that. That's fine. I will read it. I will laugh at your experiences, but no, forget it.
I feel like it's an American horror 80s kid experience to stand in the dark and say Candyman in the bathroom, and and then your brother flips the light on and scares the shit out of you.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that Bloody Mary and all those things, they're kind of just passed along out here, and it's like we play with it, but like over in that side of the world, they ain't playing with that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, stop what you're doing right now.
Why are you doing that?
Yeah, exactly. So what did you learn about Jen in the process of writing this book that maybe you didn't know before that really added like a I guess you could say like a bit of flavor to the story that maybe wasn't there when you first started writing it? Was there any of that? I mean, and the reason I asked that is I think sometimes we like understand themes or elements of our stories as we sit down to write them, but as we immerse ourselves in them and we get a little bit deeper in them, we kind of realize or learn something different about those elements. And it kind of, post writing, you sit back and go, wow, that's, got a little bit deeper of an experience than I thought. Was there anything like that with this story?
There are these like kind of like curiosities, like little strange things. Like, for example, like there are certain species of tree that apparently they like to sort of rest in while they're waiting people to mess around with, like the more sort of trickster ones, the ones who are less kind of like inherently evil.
Nice.
The thing that really, really freaked me out, and this is something that I really honed in on in the book, is like, I think with horror, a lot of the time we have this, there's kind of a formula, right? Like the monster wants this, so if you do this, everything's gonna be okay. Whereas like with this particular sort of stripe of the jinn, the kind of ghoul type, basically they're just massive bastards, and like that's just what they are. And like, it's just like, why are you doing this? Literally, it's fun. Like I don't care.
You're the one who started this.
Exactly. It's just like somebody brought you to my attention, and now I'm going to destroy you, and that's all I care about. And it's just like that idea of them just being like, totally sentient, like arguably like, more like intellectually capable than humans because of their supernatural abilities. And yet there is no reasoning with them. There's no like find the code. It's just like, no. I just want to destroy you because I took a liking to you or a disliking to you that day. It's just terrifying.
There's no logical reasoning of
just pure evil.
It makes it hard to predict, right? Unless you just
absolutely
predict pure evil. And
that's
we're kind of programmed to not do that to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Unless you're a tax collector.
yeah, unless you work for the Internal Revenue Service. So if you write this book, Shadow of the Hidden, 10 years ago, how different do you think it is? I mean, I can't say 10, but pre your experiences in that region of the world. I mean, obviously it's just so rich with that.
I mean, oh God, I just don't think I could do it. Honestly, I don't think I could have done it before I went there. Because I think, I write like, it's really interesting actually. The book I'm writing right now is the first long form fiction I've written in the UK. Everything else has been abroad. So like, so my first novella, The Balance, was written in Poland, where I lived for 3 years. Below was set in a mine in California, but I'd been in mines in Poland, so that's where I got the inspiration for that from. And the book I finished and is currently with my publisher awaiting a release date, which is called The Siren of Armorique. That was set in Armorique in France, which I visited a couple of years ago as part of a research project to kind of get all the stuff together for it. So I love location. I love absorbing location. I love eating all the food in a location, so I know it really well. And I love just being in. I think you just, when you go to a place, you just have that feel and that sense of it. Like you said about being in Turkey, you kind of feel that place. It weighs on you in such a way. And I don't feel like I could create those places. Maybe that's a lack of imagination on my part, but I don't feel like I could create those places as faithfully if I didn't experience them firsthand.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reason I even, that question kind of came to me when I was reading the book was I think that's one of the things that separates it from similar stories. I guess when I'm reading I'm looking for differentiators or what
Yeah.
makes this unique. And I just don't think you could have written that story had you not experienced those regions to that
Yeah.
depth. I think it's
I
just,
agree. I agree.
it makes the story so much richer. So, and you brought up the food for the record. I was telling Kev before we came online, I was like, I've got to ask this guy if he's a foodie, because dude, these people eat in this
Yeah.
book. It's like, don't read this book while you're between meals, because you'll be like, dude, I want a snack right now.
I'm going to try and get like a deal with Uber Eats for the audio book. Like,
yeah, get a sponsorship.
Exactly.
You can absolutely pull that off. I think I looked up and told my wife one time yesterday, I was like, I don't think I've ever seen people eat this much in a story. It's kind of nice. I'm getting hungry. So it was really cool to see how much you were able to actually. I think that was a really great way to pull some of those local cultures into the story a bit.
That's the thing. I think like food really grounds you in a place, yes. Right? Like when you go to a place and you eat something that's like, I've never eaten anything like this before in my life. It's like that for me is a big part of that traveling experience. I also think as well, like a lot of the time when you're busy, and this is an adventure horror story, so these people are busy as F, right? And so like the only time when you actually get to sit down and like take stock and kind of exchange ideas a lot of the time is actually when you're stopping to eat. So it kind of made sense for them to have those experiences. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about, I mean, you classify this as an adventure horror, and it's even in the subtitle on the cover. Or on
that's because I did like an Amazon ads course, and the guy was like, put subtitles in with exactly what you want people to look for, because that will like sell books. And I was like, okay, I'll do that, because I know nothing. So
how's that working out for you? You got me peaked. I was not aware of that.
I haven't actually. Interestingly, I changed the subtitle of the ebook version of my short story collection to 13 Tales of Horror. And since then, the sales have gone up like quite a bit. So maybe there's something in it. Yeah, I don't know.
Right. So, guys, if you're a writer, you just learned something like I just did, then let's all just send Kev our thanks via the good waves that we can send out there. And
if it doesn't work, don't send me hate, please.
No, you don't get it both ways, man. This is your curse.
I am cursed now. I am cursed.
My little bit of sales tanked. I went from 1 book a day to 0 books a day, right? So
1 book a day, I'll take that all week.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like, by the way, that's my actual goal.
Yeah, same. Jesus.
1 book a day.
That'd be amazing.
Let's do it. Yeah, it's great. So with Shadow of the Hidden being adventure horror, how do you classify adventure horror? I mean, I've had a lot of writers on here that we've, I guess kind of because I write a lot of grief horror. I've had a lot of people that I've interviewed that have written grief horror, even some gothic, where we can dive into like what is, truly like adds the or meets the requirements of gothic that a reader expects, not necessarily what some MFA program's going to teach you gothic is, but like when you see adventure horror, maybe in a subtitle on Amazon, what is that? What do you expect when you see that?
Well, I mean, someone actually wrote a review of this book, which I both laughed and enjoyed, which was like, it's like if Dan Brown wrote books that were good. I was like, I need to get that on a t-shirt. That's really good.
Yes.
But I think because this book particularly has like lots of like moving from one place to another, and a lot of mystery elements as well, which I think is always part of like an adventure story. It's kind of like piecing together this puzzle. And there's that like ticking clock race against time element as well, because like they've only got 2 weeks to resolve a situation or something bad will happen to one of Oz's family members. Read the book to find out what. So I think those elements coming together with like the fast pace and the moving around to different places, I think that sort of struck me as being something that is quite adventure horror-y. And I saw quite a few adventure horror books coming out in the last few months. And now, of course, I say that, all of the titles escape me. But I have seen quite a few of them sort of bandied around.
I warned you about that before we went live.
Yeah.
If I ask you
I mean,
for a
I've
book
got
rec,
to recommend, but like the books that are specifically adventure horror, that is like, whoa, gone.
yeah, there's just something funny that happens when the camera comes on and I ask people for book recs. They're like, I talk to this person 3 times a week and I can't remember their name. Or I just read the book yesterday and I can't remember the title. It's just like
one example actually of adventure horror actually is Mike Clark, who I tabled with at AuthorCon.
Yes,
who is a fantastic gent.
High.
His book, Hell on High, exactly. That's an adventure horror as well. It's like got elements in the Colombian Amazon jungle. It's got like mountain climbing up Everest. Like, so it's another classic example. Like lots of forward motion, lots of propulsion in terms of like people going to different places, and yeah, like this whole kind of race against time thing as well.
Keep going. I'm listening. I just needed to take a break here for a second.
Oh, very good. Well, nice product placement. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Your check will be in the post.
Paths best left untrodden.
Exactly.
Love it.
I wasn't sure if untrodden was a word actually when I first came up with that title.
It is now.
But it is. Yeah.
So how long ago did you start writing this? 2022?
2021 I started, and then it took about a year because I always have the summer where I don't really write, so it's like a sort of 9 months of my year is writing time basically.
Gotcha. And so did you write the story and then query, or how did that?
I wrote the story and then sent it to beta readers, which was really good experience. Yeah. And I try to, when I do beta reading stuff, I always try to have like, there's 1 or 2 that I trust always, like Dan Howarth is like one of my first beta readers because he's like very good. Like he's a very no bullshit kind of guy. Like if he thinks something doesn't work, he will just tell you straight up, like this does not work, which is really good. But then I try to get someone different every time as well. So I've got like a fresh perspective, which is really helpful. So yeah, I did that and then sent it to a few publishers, and Bridges Gate came back and said like, yeah, love it, but our catalog for 2023 is completely full. So it has to come out in spring 2024. If you're okay with that, we can sign. And I was like, oh my God, another year without a new book. But yeah,
what do I do?
Yeah, it's so stressful, like trying to stay relevant. Like I don't know how true it is, you know, from a reader perspective, but from an author perspective, like, it's just like a nightmare.
Yeah, and you know, I love that you bring that up because it may be perceived, it may not be real, like you said, for the readers, but from a writer's perspective, it feels like a terrible turn of events if you have to skip a year to pub.
Absolutely, you're like treading water, but in like tar. You know, it's just like, oh God, I'm going to drown in this thing. Yeah.
This is going to come out. No one's going to even remember who I am.
This is it. This is exactly it. Like all the, because you do feel like, you know, like, oh, I've got a new book out and like some people have read it and liked it. So hopefully they're going to buy the next book. But then if the next book, like some of those people have died, for example, you know, it's unhelpful.
Yeah. And then the ones who have been born, how am I going to reach them with good marketing?
Exactly. God damn it. They're still in kindergarten, not paying attention to Amazon ads.
Yeah. They got other shit going on. So, I mean, one quick look at your website, by the way, if anyone's not gone to kevharrisonfiction.com, I encourage you to do so. Your published work, dude, you got quite the list of titles out there or projects that you've been a part of. How long have you been publishing?
So I think my first published story was in like 2017. 2017 was a crazy year, and I basically had I did a competition at Christmas 2016. I'd basically broken up with my girlfriend. I was alone in a very cold flat in Lisbon, having just moved here, didn't speak the language, and was feeling sorry for myself. I wrote like a story for a competition, sent it to my friend, Michael David Wilson from This Is Horror, and said, is this shit? And he said, actually, I don't think this is shit at all. I think you should change a couple of things. So he gave me some tips. I changed it, sent this competition, and I won second prize. And I was like, whoa.
Wow.
So, and that made me kind of think like, maybe I can do this writing thing that I've always wanted to do since I was a kid, you know, after all. So Michael then invited me to do a thing on the This Is Horror Discord server, which was the story a week challenge, where you basically say for one whole year, I'm going to try and write a new story every week. And if you fail, it doesn't matter. Like basically I failed, but I got 38 short stories and a novella. So I was like, yeah, in 1 year, that's all right. I'll take that kind of failure every year, you know? So that novella was the balance. And a lot of those short stories were then reworked. And a lot of them made it into anthologies and stuff like this. And and podcasts and all kinds of places. A lot of them went in the bin. Obviously, a lot of those stories were just god awful, but that's fine. That's part of the process as well. So
Sure.
2017 I started publishing, and that's where it kind of. And my first novella, The Balance, was 2020.
Excellent. That's inspiring, because I think there's a lot of listeners or people watching this who they're either early in their writing career or they're aspiring to become one, and they're following different stories and different authors, and they come across episodes like this, and I feel like it's a good opportunity to kind of show them how you got your start. Because I was talking with a friend of mine recently, and we both started our writing careers late in life.
And me too, absolutely.
Yeah, same with Chris Panettiere. Chris and I were talking on our episode for the Redemption of Morgan Bright, and he was a lawyer, had a very successful legal practice, and we were kind of nerding out a little bit about how like we got into this as professional writers later in life, even though we've been writing for
like
years.
Forever, as it were. Yeah.
Although Chris, I may be wrong, but I think I recall that Chris was like, I didn't write when I was younger, unlike a lot of writers. He didn't start writing until he was an adult, period. Wow. So I found that pretty fascinating, especially if you read the Redemption of Morgan Bright and you see how brilliant it is. You're like, really?
I have it, but I have yet to read it. But yeah.
So good. Hopefully you will have fun on the plains of Nebraska. As someone who's been to the United States, like that's a very unique part of our country. Let's just
is it like super desolate? Is that kind of vibe? Yeah,
flat fields, just middle America.
Wow,
desolate. Yeah, it's like just plain country. So it's kind of a fascinating place to put an insane asylum.
Yeah, exactly. Like you could get out, but what would be the point?
Yeah, like why go anywhere? There's nothing else here. So I've got to ask, why all the moving? Why all the travel? Why all the things? And do you feel like when you move from place to place, it's because you have like this sense of adventure? And if so, like it almost seems like it's like inseparable from you, and it's a natural part of your writing because it's really a like part of the core of who you are. Is there anything to that, or am I reading too far into that?
No, you're absolutely spot on. I mean, like the two things I like doing most in life probably are traveling and eating, and those things come together. And I think this all comes from my dad, actually. And you probably saw at the start of the book, I actually dedicated Shadow of the Hidden to my dad, who passed away 2 years ago, which is a real shame because he read all my other stuff. And like, I think this would have been the one that really ticked all his boxes. So basically, like yourself, actually, my dad was in the military, in the British Army for most of his childhood. He basically grew up poor. And with his family, it was kind of like a case of like, okay, if you are going to stay at home, you can't go and study like post 16. You have to either get a job or like leave the home. And so he was like, well, I don't want to get like a dead end job because I've got no qualifications because I'm like leaving school at 16. So he just went to the army, joined up, and they like said, okay, we're going to put you through basic training and then we're going to send you to Kenya. And he was like, good, brilliant. So he just went to Kenya. And then later on, he lived in like in a place like in an indigenous Canadian reservation in Medicine Hat in Canada. And then he lived in Germany and did a tour in Northern Ireland, which I think was a really disturbing and horrible experience, which he didn't talk about. But like, all the traveling he did, like he kind of really talked about that a lot as a kid, when I was a kid, sorry. And so I always grew up like hearing about all these other places and about like food that sounded completely batshit crazy. Like the time, like some Maasai in Kenya said like, come and have dinner with us. And they went there and they were like cooking snake, just like butterflied snake on a barbecue. And my dad's like, well, I can't not eat it now because like,
that's
the
really big muscle.
So yeah, exactly. He said it was actually really pretty good. He said it was a bit rubbery, but like pretty bloody good. Yeah. So yeah, that was kind of a really formative experience for me as a youngster. And so when I got old enough, I just immediately like I would be the guy who like on payday I'd go out for a beer with my friends. I'd have like one beer and I'd be like, well, I got to go home. And they'd be like, what do you mean? I'd be like, I'm broke. They'd be like, got paid today. I'll be like, I bought 3 flights. Like, That's what I did. Like every month, I just bought flights to go somewhere else. I never
That's
really felt
awesome.
at home in the UK. Like never really felt like I
Oh,
belonged to the UK society particularly. Like there's bits of me that are so British, like tea. Um, but like, but it's also like a very kind of quite a violent culture, like UK culture, and also quite like sort of um, how should I say it? Like kind of skeptical of the difference. So me growing up with like long hair in a metal band, like
yeah.
wearing band t-shirts, just it was always like a sort of running the gauntlet of like dickheads who wanted to sort of fight you for no reason other than that you didn't look the same as them.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I don't really want to be part of that. So I want to get the hell out of here. And I didn't figure out how that was possible until I was 31, sadly.
Wow. That's amazing.
Mm.
What metal t-shirts were your favorites? Like I gotta know what was getting your ass kicked in the
I
UK.
mean,
Like,
when I started off, like in getting into metal, when I was like sort of 13 or 14, it was like bands like Sepultura, like was
yes.
their Chaos AD album was like
Yes.
a big formative one for me. Yeah.
Hell yeah, dude.
But then I got into loads of like death metal. There's a band from the Netherlands called Gorefest. I don't know if you know them.
Mm-mm.
I mean, their Raise album is just like still, I think, like just absolutely incredible. Like it's like really melodic, but just like heavy as hell. And so I had a jacket, like a leather jacket, and one of my friends was like a Warhammer painting guy, so his paint skills were amazing, and he painted their like GF like in flames logo on the back of the jacket.
Yeah.
So I would walk around in that kind of thing like the whole time, and like long black curly hair before I went so grey,
Yeah.
and that was just my look, for like 10, 15 years, much to the delight of local thugs.
That's awesome. So like Sepultura is obviously not British. Who's your favorite British metal group?
Gosh, okay, wow, my word.
You can group them if you'd like. You don't have to have just.
I mean, I really liked Paradise Lost when I was younger,
Okay.
and My Dying Bride, very cheerful bunch.
Yeah.
So those are probably the top British ones. But I got really into like Scandinavian music. Like I really got into like Gothenburg kind of bands, like like At the Gates and Dark Tranquillity and stuff like that, and also like some Norwegian black metal. Like I really liked Emperor. Okay, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, we can thank England, or we can thank British metal culture for metal. Period. Because
oh, absolutely. Like growing up with Sabbath and stuff like this. Absolutely. It's where it kind of all began, right? So.
Yep, that is exactly right. So love.
And I lived in Birmingham for a while, and like in Birmingham, I mean, like they're just slightly above God in the pecking order. So
yes, just above.
Just above, exactly.
Yeah. Wait, does God wear boots there? It's like everyone wears
black
boots.
Clothes. Only black clothes.
Well, I appreciate you sharing so much about your motivation behind the story, and I really like the insight into where you come from and what inspired you to become the writer you are today. And I mean, now your story resonates with me even more than when I was reading it, because I feel like you are definitely present in your prose. Like you're in your writing. And I know it sounds like a ridiculous thing to say because it's hard to remove the writer from the writing, but some people don't really, their writing doesn't ring like a tone of who the writer is as clearly and as pronounced as you do. So I think that it was really cool to get that kind of insight into your background and your lifestyle and all the things, man. And you're in Portugal.
Yeah.
It's amazing. How is the what is it like being a writer, a horror writer living in Portugal? Is there like a big horror scene there, or?
It's a funny thing, actually. There's not really a big horror scene, but there is like this really amazing horror movie festival called Motel X, which is where I actually saw the Ari Aster interview a couple of years ago. So that's every September, and it's in Lisbon. And I mean, like last year, for example, we went to see Infinity Pool, the what's the guy's name? Cronenberg. I can't remember his first name. Oh my god! But the son of the original Cronenberg, obviously. But yeah, Brandon Cronenberg, that's the guy.
Okay.
Thank you, brain. Switching on. But yeah, he actually came and talked and showed Infinity Pool like in a European premiere last year. We went to see the film, and at the end, my wife said like, "What the hell was that?" And I said like, "Come on, it was really good." Sorry, Brandon, but no accounting for taste. Um,
Yeah.
but yes, we have that like movie scene, and we have like a Comic Con thing which has some horror presence. So I'm going to try and get involved with that next year. But it's kind of niche here, like
Yeah.
horror fiction and film is quite niche. So yeah, I tried to get over to the UK. I came obviously over to the US for the first time in a very long time this year, and that was just a wonderful experience to meet yourself and just meet lots of other like-minded people and people I'd known online for like what seems like donkey's years, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I have to ask at this point, like, how does Williamsburg stack up against all those places? Because you were in Williamsburg, Virginia.
But it was beautiful. I mean, like it was
Gorgeous.
fascinating because of the history. Like, I mean, I love history, and I don't really know much about the Civil War. Maybe because the history is written by the winners, right? So probably the Brits in school went like, there was a Civil War. We don't need to talk about that. Like, it's fine. Like, don't worry about it because we lost.
Wait, you call that your Civil War?
That was your Civil War. But wasn't the Civil War like sort of going like, oi, England?
The Revolutionary War.
Revolution.
Yeah.
See what I mean? My American history, absolutely.
I was surprised. I'd be surprised if you knew about our Civil War.
I know what it is, but I mean, I don't know anything about it. So Civil War and Revolutionary War stuff. That was really interesting to kind of be there, and obviously with it being a historic town, that like a living museum, that was really interesting. And also, I saw like more eagles in that 5 days.
Yes,
than I've seen in the rest of my life combined.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought like if I was a rabbit that had like an injured leg right now, I'd be really, really displeased with my prospects. Yeah.
There's a lot of eagles here. People are kind of surprised. We actually didn't notice it until we moved here because we had been around this area quite a bit, but we didn't live here at the time. And then when we did move here and we realized like how many bald eagles there are, we were like, wow, this is crazy. We have
bonkers.
We have a huge nest right near our home. And every morning on my way to drive my kids to school, they're up there flying around over the highway. It's crazy.
Amazing. They're beautiful creatures, like really,
huge bird.
Huge. Yeah, like terrifying, murderous creatures, but beautiful creatures.
Beautiful creature that could kill you. So did you have any other previous trips to the US or was that your first?
The first time I came over was 96. And basically that was the last time I was there. So like it was like 28 years between trips, which is absolutely mad. Like,
where were you at the first time?
I went to an island off of the west coast of Florida because basically like I was at high school and one of my friend's mums was a flight attendant. And she said like, I can get like flights and like an apartment for a month for like $100. Do you guys want to come and do that? And we were like, the rain of Southern England or go to a beach island in Florida for a month. Let me just think about it for a moment. And so we went happily along there. And when we got there was a Brazilian girls' school staying in the next hotel, which was just like, I mean, obviously I was like a pathetic 16-year-old boy, so they just laughed at me. But still, just being there around that situation was quite attractive.
Yeah, that's great. So it's not like Williamsburg.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah, just a little different. Well, you're welcome back anytime, man. We would love to have you back here in Williamsburg, whether it be for AuthorCon or not.
The welcome was amazing, honestly. Like I was a bit concerned because like, we hear a lot of like the news is always the bad news, right? So when we see the news about the US, a lot of it is, about sort of bad things happening and like, guns and all that kind of stuff. And of course that stuff does exist, but like, but I was really pleasantly surprised by just how kind everyone was. DC was amazing. Like people were so unbelievably friendly. So it will not be that long before I'm back. Like no question.
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, we look forward to having you back, dude. So, well, do you want to tell us any book recs you have that you've been kind of holding on to lately? You read any good stories lately?
Yeah, I really have read a lot of good stories lately, actually. One being you were talking about Cat Silver earlier, and I read her short novella Undead Folk.
Yes.
Recently, which have you read that?
Oh yeah.
Oh man, I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah.
And like it wasn't what I was expecting at all. Like because it starts off in this really kind of light, jovial. I mean, it's weird because like it's a kind of a post-apocalyptic world, but the character has just so much spark and spunk and stuff, and then things get dark, and when they get dark they get really fucking dark.
Yes.
But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed like the kind of moral quandaries of the protagonist, and like for such a short tome there was just so much in there, you know what I mean, just so much to reckon with. And so I bloody loved that. Yeah. So that's a big recommendation. I'm also going to recommend, because I saw this week that he sold reached 2,000 copies of the paperback. Absolute machine, this man. My good friend Ross Jeffrey.
Oh.
He wrote a book called I Died Too, but They Haven't Buried Me Yet.
Yes.
Which actually, you're a grief horror man. So have you read it?
I have not. It's literally like 3 books away in my TBR.
Man, you are going to absolutely love it. It's like, it's one that kind of has a lot of sleight of hand. You don't really know where it's going. When the finale hit me, like, I'm not even like making it up. I had my Kindle and I just like went, nope. Just put it down. And I had like 15 minutes of like, what the actual, like, just completely just blew my mind. So
I
yeah,
love
it was brilliant
that.
up to then. It was brilliant up to then. There's lots of violence. There was lots of like crazy, like sort of like flawed protagonist stuff, which I loved.
Yeah.
But when the reveal came, I was just like absolutely floored. Like, I think it's his best work just on the basis of that.
Excellent.
You're gonna love it. Yeah, definitely. Let me know. Let me know how you get on.
Oh, the FOMO is killing me right now, man.
Hurrah!
Yeah. Well, thanks for the Rex, man. You know, my most recent read is Shadows. So I'm you know, very impressed.
Please recommend it to people.
I do. I recommend it to people. And you know, the worst thing that could have happened was if like you came on to talk about it and I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
What happened? What did I just
I'm still on page 7.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
So bad. Yeah. DNF. We'll do the podcast episode anyways. Now I was a little intimidated when I started this weekend, because I was like, all right, I gotta get my brain wrapped around this story for this podcast episode. Then I was like, I don't want to put this down. Like, yes, this is the best of both worlds. Like, I get to talk to this dude about this story this week. So this is great. So,
man, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I'm so glad.
Huge rec for that. And I follow your rec on Kat Silva's Undead Folk as well, which you know, say hi to Kat because she's coming on next episode, guys. Hi, Kat. So, well, dude, thanks for coming on. I appreciate
thanks
you.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Guys, make sure you go out and get Shadows of the Hidden. It is so good. It's unique. It's got great flavor, tons of food if you're a foodie. And you're going to love the concept of gin and all the craziness that comes with trying to deal with an inescapable curse. That's awesome. Probably the best way to put it. So, all right. Appreciate you, dude. And look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode.